There we go. So I'll say welcome again to the MIOSHA Requirements webinar for HR Excellence. So again, you will get a copy of the presentations that you'll be seeing today. There'll be a couple polls as we go through today just to understand what you guys are looking for as part of our HR Excellence series as well. And if you do have any questions during Tony's presentation here today, feel free to throw those questions in chat. So he's going to be covering a lot of information as we go through this, and throw those questions in chat so we can make sure that we start addressing them as we go through our presentation here today. All right, so with that, Luke, I am going to turn it over to you here for our warm welcome. We've got Luke. You're still on mute, Luke. There you go. Oh, wait, you are double muted. You are still muted.
Okay, my mute unmute button on my remote and my mute unmute button on my computer apparently are both working overtime tonight. So
they are. You sound so professional too, so welcome, Luke. Thank you.
It's all the microphone, and I think I learned that from Clint, actually. He's the one that began to preach the gospel of the headset for me here.
Yes.
So thank you, Julie. I wanted to thank everybody for being here and welcome you to the first session of the HR Excellence Program. And this HR Excellence Program is the first of hopefully many programs that we're putting on the Saline Area Chamber of Commerce, and particularly the Business Organizational Alliance. And that's a group that's chaired by Paul Larson, the CFO at MMI Engineered Solutions. And I know that Paul's probably no stranger to most of you. And if he is, you really should remedy that. He's a great person to have on your side, and he's a great person to get a project like this off the ground. So I am, like Julie said, the president of the Saline Area Chamber of Commerce for the next year. But in my day job, I'm an attorney. And a lot of my job involves answering questions. And a lot of the times, well, most of the time, the answer is, it depends. And the great thing about a program like tonight is being able to hear from Tony about what's going on at MIOSHA directly from somebody at MIOSHA, hearing about great programs like the MIOSHA Ambassadorships, things like that, that really can get you from that it depends to this is the really important thing that you need to be doing. So thank you so much to Tony for coming and speaking to us. Thank you for Julie for facilitating. And I will put myself on double mute again and let the professionals get to work. Thank you.
There you go. Thank you so much, Luke. It's great to have you on here with us tonight. All right. And then just for those of you who have not met me yet, there's a lot of new faces that I haven't met on the screen here tonight, except for maybe at the Saline Area Chamber of Commerce golf outing, which I can't wait to get to again. I'm hoping the weather is going to be getting better pretty soon, even though I know it's going to be a little bit of a stretch here with some cold weather, but we can always be thinking about that chamber outing. So my name is Julie Miller. I'm the president and co-founder of Joint Pivot based in Saline. And we do a lot of consulting as it relates to lean, continuous improvement, problem solving, project management, strategic planning, executive coaching, all sorts of that fun stuff. And we are loving being in Saline. I have lived here now for almost 12 years. And when Paul approached me to be part of this program, I jumped on it. My background is actually in mechanical engineering as my undergrad, but my master's is actually in organizational behavior, and I've spent a lot of time working in and with HR over the years. So being able to take the people and the process side is what really drew me to being a facilitator with the HR Excellence Program. And I commit to you guys to find the best speakers and to find the best subject matter experts to bring into our community to help us with any of the HR problems that we are dealing with, knowing that 2 heads is always better than 1 and many heads is better than just 2. So welcome tonight. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to contact me. All right, we'll jump to the next slide here. Just a quick overview. You guys know who the Chamber of Commerce is. We are making sure that we are making the Saline area the best and most outstanding place to live and work, and the best place for us to be able to be doing business. And that really is the goal that we have behind us. It's such a fantastic organization. You guys know that, or you would not be a part of it. So just help make sure that we can continue to bring people into this great organization. Again, our value proposition, there's a few things that we're hitting on in the HR Excellence program here. One, helping you grow your business, because we can't all be experts in these things, but we can rent it and borrow it from certain places and learn more where we don't always have those answers. This will really help also with our professional development. It helps us with the community outreach to make the whole the whole community a little bit safer, especially with this topic. And then hopefully to build some strong relationships amongst the people who are on this call, build out some opportunities for networking, and then building out our own leadership. So a quick word for you guys on HR Excellence. Obviously, this is the first one for 2021, and it is an add-on to your chamber membership. So if you are interested in becoming an HR member, if you are not already, please make sure that you're contacting me. You can also contact Paul at this point, or there is an email at the end of who you can contact if you'd like to be part of the HR Excellence program moving forward. And again, that applies for the entire company, not just for an individual. And you can be a member of any chamber. So you don't have to be necessarily a member of the Saline chamber to be part of the HR Excellence program. You just have to be a member of the chamber. So you guys know there are a lot of topics that were of interest. So we sent out a survey after our last webinar that we did in November. And up on the screen here is all of the different topics that people expressed interest on. And you can see that first one is COVID-19 records and OSHA requirements, which is why we've got Tony on here today from MIOSHA to help us understand those. So we went right after the top vote getter. And we are planning the rest of our topics for this year around what we have heard from people. So one of the things I would like to ask while you guys on here, we're just going to jump into our first poll here quick, is to ask the question for you guys, because I know a lot of you on the call so far have not taken this survey, and I'm going to launch the polling here of which of these topics that we have up here on the screen do you want to hear more about? And I put those, I think most of the ones that have 2 or more votes up there, it is multiple choice. So if there are multiples out there that you would like to vote for, this will absolutely help us understand where we need to focus our efforts and what type of subject matter experts I need to go hunt down to bring into our sessions here. So please just take a moment here to fill out that survey. I'll give you about 20 more seconds here. So you guys are popping in here. Thank you. There's so many good topics. I wish we could cover them all at one time. All right. Okay, we've got the majority of people who have voted here, so thank you so very much. I'm going to close polling here. And I'm just going to share the results with you real quick so you can see them. Looks like succession planning was our #1 vote getter, with telecommuting and remote work policies coming up behind them, impacting of changing marijuana laws. So that may switch around some of what we have coming up through the rest of this year. So next week, we will be meeting as the HR steering committee for the Excellence program to go through and design out what the next 5 topics for the rest of the year will look like. So with that, I'll just show you a little bit of a sneak peek as to what we were planning. And again, this may change based on the results that we saw here today. So some of this may move around in the schedule a little bit. I saw a few of these things out there which kind of piqued your interest there. So know that we are essentially going to be looking at every other month in this case. And this also leads us to essentially our next poll that we have before we jump in to all of our detailed information here from Tony, is what time would you prefer to meet? I know this is not the most ideal time for a lot of people to be meeting, so I want to ask you and get your opinion for the people who are on the call here today. What is the best time for your future meetings? And there are 2 questions here. Give me your preferred time of the day, and then give me the best time or best day for future meetings, whether it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. So there's 2 questions there. You can multiple choice as you'd like. And we will base future ones for you moving forward. All right, got almost all of you voted there. All right, I will close out polling here in just a second. All right, I will end polling here. And I'm just going to share the results with you guys quick. So at least I got the day right. So Thursdays is a good day for people. So I'll take that as a small win here. And then we will figure out ways to work around from a timing perspective to make sure that this works for more people. And then know, like, once you are part of the HR Excellence Program, you will get a copy of the recording and the presentation, if we have one, via email as well if you are unable to attend. So it won't be necessarily a registration that you'll have to do. Ideally, we'd like to basically know if you are part of the HR Excellence Program, you'll automatically get a calendar invite when these will be scheduled going forward. So thank you guys so much for helping us gather that information. I could certainly take a guess, but it's easier just to ask you and understand what you would prefer. All right, so on to the good stuff here. We've got Tony here who is coming in to help us. So thank you so much for coming in to speak to our group here today. I was very excited when we got paired up to start working on this. I just sent an email off to a box and Tony called me back, and we've been talking ever since to learn a little bit more about how this presentation can help our community members within our Saline Area Chamber of Commerce. Tony is an industrial hygienist with MIOSHA, and he has been doing that for, I think, since 2017, again, serving as the industrial hygienist, working a lot with their training and consultative program. And he serves specifically Monroe, Lenawee, Washtenaw, and Wayne counties. So Tony, I'm just going to hand it over to you because I know you've got a lot of great content and I don't want to steal any more of your time. So I'm just going to stop my share here and you can take on over. And again, if you've got questions for Tony as he's going through his presentation, please feel free to put those into chat and I'll be pulling those all together. And then Tony and I will take a look at them at the very end of our presentation here today.
All right, thanks a lot for the introduction, Julie.
You got it.
Can you see my presentation all right now?
We can see the PowerPoint. We can't see the, if you're going into presentation mode, we will likely see that here.
Trying to. It only works when you practice before the meeting, right?
It does.
Yeah.
It does. I mean, this is just what happens.
All right, let me try this again here.
No problem.
Try starting the slideshow first. All right, that seems to have worked better.
Wonderful. That is fantastic. So perfect. You are on, Tony. Thank you so much.
All right. As an initial matter, I'd like to thank you guys for having me. It's very important that people in positions of responsibility within companies take the time to self-educate themselves on this topic right now. MIOSHA issued an emergency standard for COVID-19 on October 14th of 2020. MIOSHA has not really issued emergency standards in the past. This is in my career a unique occurrence, which is to say this was a sudden and serious topic for employee health and safety. So the training today is going to be going over that emergency rule that was promulgated in October, which is referred to within MIOSHA as the COVID-19 emergency rules. So we're going to be going through various, you know what? I am sorry to do this, guys. I have to stop this share. I shared the wrong screen again. I apologize. Once I got off the title slide there, I realized it. Let's try this one more time.
It's happened to the best of us, Tony. Don't worry about it.
I appreciate that. All right, try closing this one.
And just so you know, Tony is off work hours now. He volunteered his time to come back and work with our group tonight. So way to go, Tony. Thank you.
My pleasure. I'm happy to do it. That's the nice thing about working for the state. Once you get this job, you're kind of doing it because you want to do it, and you would volunteer to do it. Even if it was, if I was independently wealthy, I wouldn't, want to do nothing. I'd want to do the job that I have right now.
There
So
you
I
go.
think that's good to say. And I apologize for the delay here.
That's okay.
Oh, this is uncomfortable.
Be like, let's all stare at Tony. Not a
Yeah,
problem.
yeah,
Not a problem.
I am so sorry here. Hold on one sec.
That's okay. There you go. Perfect.
Yeah, except it's not playing the presentation.
That is weird. Literally, guys, we did practice this ahead of time.
Okay. Yeah, you got to take my word for it. We had this set up previously. Okay, now we're doing it, guys. So I wanted to look at this. The other presentation looks from the employee's perspective, saying when you go back to work, what should you expect to see at your employer's place of employment? This presentation looks from the employer's side, which is to say, as an ongoing matter, what do you do for compliance with the emergency rules? So if you are the employee at your company who has some responsibility for your procedures, policies, compliance with the new MIOSHA standard, this is the more appropriate presentation to be giving you. I'm going to pick up the pace because I lost a few minutes. The important thing to realize is MIOSHA governs only the relationship between employers and employees. So we put duties on employers and we give rights to employees. If you step outside of that relationship, MIOSHA doesn't really have authority. So there are parallel requirements which are placed by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, which has responsibility for public health. So what I'm going to be talking about today will not cover all of the laws that an employer needs to be concerned about with COVID-19. It will only cover the specific regulation that was issued by MIOSHA in 2020. So this first slide just refers you to michigan.gov/coronavirus, which is kind of a good central landing pad that includes the MDHHS epidemic orders, as well as our COVID-19 emergency rules. So if you're looking for things on occupancy or public masking, or gathering size prohibitions, you're going to want to go to MDHHS for that. If you're looking for how employees conduct themselves within a workplace or how a workplace needs to handle visitors, that's going to be inside MIOSHA. So this is kind of a summary of the content of the presentation, a table of contents, if you will. What we're going to be going over tracks the emergency rule, if you guys have reviewed it. So this presentation moves from Rule 1 to Rule 2 to Rule 3, all the way down to Rule 10. And the sections each refer to one of those rules. So we look at definitions, exposure determinations, your written plan that needs to be in place, how you stop infection from occurring at your workplace, how you appraise yourself of the health of your employees and visitors who come to your work site, what brick and mortar changes you need to make to your facility as a matter of law, what protective equipment employees need to wear as they go about their duties, what your training must contain for your employees, and what records need to be kept by the employer. There are additional vertical industry requirements in the emergency rules. They are located within Emergency Rule 9. We are going to be covering the general employer requirements because we have a mixed bag of employers at this training. So it's important that at the end of this training, you go back, look at the emergency rules, and review if your industry is more strictly regulated by this rule. such as healthcare or construction or at-home services, for example. So all MIOSHA standards, even ones that are quickly patched together like this one, start off with definitions. They start off with a statement of jurisdiction, a scope, and then definitions. So as far as a statement of jurisdiction and scope go for your reference, the rule applies to employers who are subject to MIOSHA. So if you are a sole proprietor, you know, the rule really doesn't apply to you. If you do not have employees, the rule doesn't apply to you. But if you are an employer as defined by MIOSHA, you must comply with the rule, which is probably everyone on this call. Just to flesh that out a little bit more, if you were in mining or if you were in some other areas that MIOSHA doesn't regulate, once again, you would not need to comply with this rule. That being said, the definitions are important. SARS-CoV-2 is the virus. COVID-19 is the disease. Those are pretty straightforward. The remaining three definitions on the slide deserve particular attention. Close contact, known cases, and suspected cases. It's important to realize that the emergency rule has force of law here in Michigan. If CDC changes their definitions, they only have advisory authority. You know, you must comply with our definitions as a matter of law, even if, for example, CDC were to revise their definition of close contact. So our definition of close contact was an individual within 6 foot of an infected person for at least 15 minutes accumulated, starting 2 days before illness onset, or 2 days prior to specimen collection, until the time the person is isolated. So right now that's the same, you know, 15 minutes of close contact, which is within 6 foot. Known COVID cases is a person who's been confirmed through diagnostic testing to have COVID-19 without reference to what diagnostic test, okay? Without reference to rapid test or false positives or anything else. If you have a positive test, you are a known case. Suspected cases are people who are either in close contact with a known case or they have sufficient symptoms of COVID-19. For the symptoms, we are currently following CDC guidance. And as that guidance changes, those symptoms are kind of living, right? So hold that as opposed to the close contact definition. The importance of these definitions comes out in later rules. So the most pertinent thing for you to know is if you have been within 6 foot for 15 minutes or more of a person with a known positive case, you are a suspected case and subject to the rules. And we'll get into that again later. Just keep that in the back of your mind for now. The first duty that the rules place on an employer is to determine qualitatively whether or not there's any exposure to coronavirus in their work procedures and tasks, whether any of their employees might be exposed to coronavirus. Step 2 is to categorize or further classify that exposure in one of 4 categories: lower, medium, high, or very high. So let's unpack that. Do you have exposure to COVID-19 to any of your employees? If your employees are from more than one household and they work in the same facility, the answer is yes. If pretty much for everybody, there's some exposure to COVID-19.
Hey, Tony, we just lost you for like the last 10 seconds. Can you just repeat what you said?
Sure. I was just covering the qualitative assessment. Generally, all employers should assume that there is exposure of their employees to some extent of COVID-19. The only exception to that would be really a person who works in complete isolation from society. So most employees will then be classified into lower, medium, high, or very high exposure risk. The definitions of these are linked at the bottom of the slide. If you click on those two hyperlinks, they'll pull up a document called the OSHA 3990 guidance document. But even that is not particularly helpful in really classifying employee exposures. So I think it's good to spend some time on this with people. Lower exposure risk is somebody who works from home, is somebody who works in an isolated facility by themselves, who has brief and sporadic contact with the general public or other employees, right? Less than 15 minutes in and out. I consider myself a lower exposure risk employee as I work from home. Once I start going to employer facilities, that's a medium exposure risk. And the important thing to remember is that you categorize the tasks and procedures. So I'm not a lower exposure risk employee. I know I use that term, I shouldn't have. When I'm at home doing data entry, I'm performing, or giving this presentation, I'm performing a lower exposure risk task or procedure. When I go to an employer's facility to review their implementation of these controls, I'm stepping up to a higher exposure risk task. A medium exposure risk task is one that interacts with the general public and other employees as a matter of their duties. A bagger at a grocery store, a person working in an office building or on an assembly line, a teacher teaching a class, most jobs that you think of are medium exposure risk jobs. They don't have particular exposure to the virus. They see a lot of people, anyone could be asymptomatic and sick, that's the medium exposure risk, but they don't see known positive cases, or they don't take the cases that they're seeing and really get a lot of respiratory droplets created, okay? Stepping up to high exposure risk, there's a couple ways to do it. The first way is you gotta get in close contact with a known or suspect case of COVID, okay? That's the easy way. If you need to work with people who are sick with COVID or who were in close contact, or whatever, had the symptoms but didn't get a positive test, you're a high exposure risk employee. If you work in, the department of the hospital that deals with, the intensive care unit or whatever that cares for these individuals, you're at least a high exposure risk employee. Other examples are paramedics, right, who have to give CPR to somebody without knowing whether they're sick or not. Dentists who need to go in there and aerosolize a lot of stuff in a person's mouth without knowing if they're sick or not. So it isn't just being around the sick people, it's being around asymptomatic people and really exposing yourself to a higher chance of infection. So either one of those two paths puts you in a high exposure risk category, right? So that EMS person, they got a lot of tasks that are medium, right? And then the task of delivering CPR to a comatose person, that's probably a high exposure risk task. Very high exposure risk tasks are the combination. A person's sick and you gotta create a lot of risk to yourself, respiratory droplets. The intubation of a sick person is a high exposure risk, very high exposure risk task. Dental procedures on a sick person would be a very high exposure risk task. That CPR, if you know a person has COVID, is a very high exposure risk task. Okay, so that's kind of how you break them down. What does it matter? Depending on the exposure risk that you classify an employee, you need to give them the appropriate PPE, training, and resources for that exposure risk. So for a lower exposure risk individual, you don't need to give them as much training as a medium or personal protective equipment, et cetera, et cetera. As you step up, you need to give them more. So a medium exposure risk employee needs to wear a face mask in the workplace. A high exposure risk employee needs to wear a respirator in the workplace. A very high exposure risk employee might need a specified higher level of respiratory protection, such as a powered air purifying respirator. And then you talk about all the other personal protective equipment as well, such as disposable gloves, safety goggles, face shields, gowns, disposable garments, all that stuff. So that is fleshed out on these following slides. I think I gave you some good examples to follow. These slides give you the exact language from that OSHA guidance document that we refer to in our emergency rule. If you look at emergency rule 2, we actually have the OSHA 3990 document hyperlinked in our emergency rule for your reference as well. So once you've determined that you have an employee who's exposed to COVID, and once you've looked at the tasks and procedures of your employees and categorized them, and just do the major tasks and procedures, guys. Don't make a list of 1,000. You know, try to keep it reasonable for yourselves. Then you need to implement a written program. Any person who's worked in human resources or safety and health for a while knows that OSHA is crazy about written programs. For the duration of the emergency rule, you need to have a written program on file, and you need to be in compliance with the rules. As long as we're on the topic of duration, just so you guys are aware, it was promulgated on the 14th, and it's currently in effect for 6 months. So that will expire on April 14th, 2021. However, it can be renewed, revised, altered, whatever, you know, at that time period. So I would just have you maybe, you know, make that a red letter day on your calendar to follow back up and see what the state of the law is. All right, so you need to have a written plan. We have a template program. It's for low and medium risk employees, but even if you have high risk or very high risk operations, it's a great starting point. It's a Word document. You can click on those green letters on the left and get a copy of it. Basically, our template program is guaranteed to hit the bases that are on the slide as far as engineering controls, administrative controls, all these other required elements. You do not have to use our template program as long as the program that you are using has the appropriate content. I will let you know that most of the other programs that I've seen that have been provided by law firms or associations have not been compliant. There's been a lot of changes in the rules. We went through a bunch of executive orders. Those were deemed unconstitutional and unconstitutional use of the emergency power of the governor. And then we had a gap where really there was no law. Then we had these rules. So whatever template program you're using, wherever it's from, a good starting point is to check the date, the revision date or the issuance date. If it's prior to October 14th, 2020, it's no good. It's literally no good. It will not help you if enforcement shows up. So, you know, if it's after that, you got a fighting chance. If anyone's not sure whether their program's compliant, they can reach out to us and we can review those programs with them. So once you've developed that written program, you need to make it available to your employees. You have your choice in how to do that. I always like the belt and suspenders, you know, put it on an internal drive or website, as well as providing it hard copy at, you know, the work site. Then you need to say what you're going to do. So we know we have a problem. You have employees, there's a pandemic, it kills people when they get close together, right? The thing that gets you sick is other people, and we're making you get around other people. So how are we protecting you? You know, the general duty clause says an employer can't put an employee basically in, you know, serious danger. And that's what you're doing. You're putting them in serious danger by having them come to work. Well, the rule says if you follow A, B, C, and D, you won't be liable. You know, we're not saying it's going to be 100%, you know, waterproof, but you're going to be good enough to not get a citation from MIOSHA. You need to start following the hierarchy of controls. A diagram on the left here tells you what that is. It's a process of elimination of the hazard from the workplace. Your first two steps, elimination and substitution, are very difficult in this setting. Elimination would be removing people. To remove the virus, you need to remove people. That's not very feasible for most operations. Substitution, there's really not much substitution for people. You know, just like elimination, you know, we don't have good robotic operations for most professions. So you step down to engineering controls in your preparedness and response program. You isolate people from the hazard. You make brick and mortar changes to your facility. you are required by law to have made brick and mortar changes to your facility due to COVID. You must have put up, where feasible, engineering controls. The only way you can get out of having high efficiency air filters, increased ventilation rates, physical barriers such as clear plastic barriers or a drive-through window or 1,000 other examples I can rattle off is because they're not feasible. Feasibility is kind of a complex subject. Think of it as extremely burdensome is probably the best analogy I can give people. Not impossible, just laughably burdensome for the benefit. If it's reasonably doable, you got to do it. Then you step down to administrative controls, changing the way that people work. We specify these in our emergency rules. Some examples are listed out here. You must do these as a matter of law. You must restrict business travel as a matter of law. You must promote remote work as a matter of law, et cetera, et cetera. The big steps are social distancing, personal hygiene, and face masking, right? Those are like the trifecta of protecting people. Hand washing is perhaps the most important part of personal hygiene, followed by hand-to-mouth contact. So our standard looks to those. Our emergency rule specifies that the word shall, bold underlined, means you must, and this is spelled out in our rule, promote hand washing, put up hand washing signs, have a hand washing sink with soap if possible, sanitizer if not. Tell your employees not to come to work if they're sick. That's any kind of sick, not just COVID sick. Prohibit them from using each other's equipment where possible. So if you have a central copier, you should have a copy person. If you have, a series of exam rooms, you should have dedicated one employee per exam room policies, right? And on and on, right? We want to eliminate frequently touched surfaces as much as possible. And the last one is the big sticking point with a lot of employers that I hope we have a lot of back and forth on when it comes to Q&A. You must create a policy prohibiting in-person work for employees to the extent, not extend, extent that the work activities can feasibly be performed remotely. Layman's terms, if there's a job that they can do at home or at the office, they cannot do that job at the office. They must do that job at home. Basic infection prevention measures continued. What else do we have to do? Whatever you were doing before COVID for cleaning your facility, you got to do more now, especially with regards to high touch surfaces. Door handles is the one that people always talk about, but think about it. Any handle, file cabinet handles, any service counters, right? Any, just use your head. Where do people go? What do they touch? Coffee makers, bathrooms, all that stuff. Has to be an EPA approved list end disinfectant. If you click that link, it will take you to that list. 10% bleach and 60% IPA, I believe, are both list end approved disinfectants, but there's a lot more. And you must follow the manufacturer's instructions for whatever you're using. Just because I got the microphone, I'll let you know, if you're using 10% bleach, don't put it in spray bottles. MIOSHA will have a field day with you with that. Because it's a personal protective equipment thing. If you get it in your eyes, you need eye washes and HAZCOM and a lot of other things. Explain to your employees the difference between cleaning and disinfecting. A lot of these disinfectants require a two-pass process, one to remove soil, another to disinfect. You must conduct a daily entry self-screening protocol for employees or contractors. And I'm going to throw it out there, probably suppliers and visitors too. People coming on site. Our rule is specific to employees and contractors, but I would have you read that as individuals coming on site. You must have the questionnaire cover symptoms of COVID-19 and contact with known or suspect cases. And if possible, it has to include a temperature screening. You can ask more, but be careful. You're treading on privacy when we're talking about health surveillances. Also, what you do with those health surveillances is important. The employer needs to make sure that their employees are instructed to report symptoms promptly, not to come to work if they are sick. And if an employee is known or suspected to have COVID-19, they must be physically isolated from the remainder of the workforce. All right, guys, you remember when I talked about a suspect case being within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes of a known case, and to remember that? This is what I wanted you to remember it for. This is an affirmative statement, no ifs, ands, or buts. If you were in close contact with a person who's a known case, you must be physically isolated from the workforce. What if you were sick before and now you're over it and now you are in close contact again, but you can't get sick and CDC says you can't get sick again because you already had it? Our rule doesn't care. You must be physically isolated. What if you've been vaccinated? And I think they're still out on whether vaccination stops contagiousness. I haven't seen any statements about that. I think Fauci said, it doesn't. But let's say it did. What if you've been vaccinated? It doesn't matter if you've been vaccinated, right? It's a black letter rule. If you were in close contact, you are physically isolated. Doesn't mean you can't work, just means you can't work here. All right. What do you do when you get that report? What do you do when someone says, I was tested, I had a positive result? You notify the local public health department immediately. If you're in the Saline area, Chamber of Commerce, probably Washtenaw County Public Health Department. That's immediately, like next thing you do. And then within 24 hours of that, so if you find out at 9 a.m. Monday, by 9 a.m. Tuesday, notify any coworkers, contractors, or suppliers who may have come into contact with the person. Once again, I would say individuals, be a little bit over-inclusive here with the person. How do you do that? Well, the health department will help you. Once you contact them, they'll help you work out who to tell and how to tell them. But basically, I would be over-inclusive for MIOSHA purposes. I would tell, people at the same physical site. Even if even if they were maybe in a different department, different room, and then pare down from there based on advice from the local public health department. They are the contact tracers. They are the experts at this, not me. But, the worst thing you'd want to do is miss somebody, and then be in violation of that rule. What about allowing people back into the workplace? We don't give any specific timelines or dates for return to work from isolation. We say follow CDC guidelines for being no longer infectious and any quarantine or isolation order by the local public health department. It's been my experience that most people have been simply following the CDC guidance, that local public health departments haven't been issuing quarantine or isolation orders. Therefore, if you are a known case yourself, it's the 10-day period. And if you are a close contact or whatever, it's the 14-day period, 10-day isolation, 14-day quarantine, with, all the little caveats from CDC. So down here at the bottom are the 2 links with the latest guidelines. I would just encourage you to follow those, for healthcare, not for healthcare. Most people are not in healthcare, use the top link. And unless you are aware of that quarantine or isolation order, you can inquire whether they're under any. Most people, to my experience, have not been receiving that. You must have for each site, each address, a designated COVID-19 safety coordinator, right? Mobile crews can have a single one at a home base, but whenever there's an employee inside a brick and mortar facility, there needs to be a COVID-19 safety coordinator designated as such using those precise words specified in your program for that address. So just to parse that out, let's say you have multiple operations, you have multiple site addresses in your company. Each one of those site addresses needs their own COVID-19 preparedness and response plan because each of them needs their own safety coordinator. And some of the other elements might be specific to that operation as well, such as where you complete your surveillance, you know, whether it's a lobby or a parking lot, et cetera, et cetera. Whatever language is predominant in your population, or excuse me, common in your population, you have to include a poster in that language. I don't know what common is. Don't ask me. I don't know what the percentage is. But, you know, have posters in different languages if you have significant, you know, other language speakers. Workplace controls, everybody needs to be kept 6 foot apart to the extent possible, and you need to reduce congestion. That's usually occupancy limits, scheduling, you know, prohibitions, training, signage, you know, one person in the kitchen at a time, you know, one person in the conference room at a time, all that stuff. Provide non-medical grade face coverings to their employees. Don't worry so much about that non-medical grade. I haven't seen a lot of issues with enforcement about that. Just see it as provide face coverings to your employees. The issue was preserving medical face coverings for medical professionals, but it's my understanding that that shortage has been, you know, addressed mostly. Require face coverings when employees cannot consistently maintain 6 feet of separation from others. What does that mean? What's consistently maintain 6 feet of separation mean? For sure, any employees that are within 6 foot of each other, they need to be face masks, right? Because they're within 6 feet, they need to be wearing their masks. However, if they don't know when an employee is going to be popping up around them, if you have a highly mobile workforce, they need to be wearing the face masks all the time. So if you got a guy in a high-low scooting around, he doesn't know what's around the corner, he's got to be wearing his face mask pretty much all the time, et cetera, et cetera. If they're very stationary and they have a level of worksite control where that can be prevented, perhaps there will be scenarios where they don't need to wear the mask. In addition to that 6 foot requirement, there's also a requirement that you wear face coverings in shared spaces. What is a shared space? First of all, it's indoor, right? So you have at least a floor, 3 walls, and a ceiling. Any indoor room is a shared space, in my opinion. So you can avoid wearing a face mask when you're in your own office, own room, and the door is closed, I think is a safe statement. Aside from that, pretty much wearing a face mask, you know, when you're at work. You need to give them the right PPE. That OSHA 3990 gives a lot of guidance for appropriate PPE for different exposure levels. If you have high or very high exposure tasks and you want to make sure you're selecting the right PPE, please feel free to reach out to us. We can help you review what you're giving your employees and make sure it's good for them. And then you need to train employees on how to use the PPE. Those 4 bullet points at the bottom there. It's only as good as it fits and as you're using it. So, you know, you're kind of limited on PPE. This is typical high exposure risk PPE right here. It looks like a doctor, right? It looks like medical PPE. That's what we're talking about. So Rule 8.3 reads, if you give medical treatment or house known suspect cases of COVID-19, this is what your guys need to wear. So sure, if we're in the hospital part where we're treating COVID-19, we got to have this. What else though? Assisted living facilities, right? They house known suspect cases of COVID-19. You're going to see people walking around assisted living facilities wearing this stuff, or at least you should. If anyone here is an adult foster care or anything like that, a licensed care facility, please reach out to us. You know, there's been a lot of citations going to that industry. This slide covers the difference between a face mask and a respirator. If you have high exposure risk employees, if you have employees who are required to wear respirators, you need a written respiratory protection program. That is a whole ball of wax. That's an 8-hour training. You know, if you have any employees who are wearing respirators and you don't have that program, call me, email me after the meeting. That's huge. So what are we talking about when we say respirators? Well, obviously they're not cloth face masks or surgical masks. They're these. They are filtering face piece respirators, elastomerics, or powered air purifying respirators. This slide covers and provides resources on respiratory protection. KN95s. They are not NIOSH approved respirators. Normally you could not let your employees wear them because frankly, they're not as good as N95 respirators due to the shortage of N95s. If you can't source an N95, you are allowed to give your employees KN95s for high exposure risk tasks. Those are still requiring a respiratory protection plan. So whatever it is, KN95, N95, all that stuff, you need a respiratory protection plan. This is your checklist for employee training. You let them know what the virus is, what the disease is, and you need to train them on what you're doing, what's in your written plan. Basically, the training is a rundown of your COVID preparedness and response plan. Record keeping. Record keeping underneath the emergency rules is not that stringent. It's a 1-year retention period from the time of generation. For employee training records, those are your sign-in sheets, content of the trainings, handouts, things like that. Screening protocols, those are your employee. This is where it gets touchy. For those of you who are in human resources, you probably know more than me about ADA HIPAA. Some of the information people are collecting may be medically protected information, may be entitled to privacy. If that is the case, I would advise that you keep a record of the result of the surveillance. That is to say, were they allowed to enter the workplace? Did they pass the questionnaire? Or were they not allowed to enter the workplace? Did they fail the questionnaire? And just keep a record of that. And notifications. Those are the call or the email to the local public health department, and the call or the email or blast or whatever to the people who may have been in contact with the sick person. These are some of the resources available from the government and from AIHA, who is awesome. You guys see that other AIHA? Hit that one. That's the best resource that you can use for further information. All of our information's on here. I was going to do a quick run through of our webpage, but I'm going to skip that so we got adequate time for question and answer. But right up here at the top where it says my OSHA webpage, just hit that and it'll bring up our COVID banner, and you can just click on the COVID banner and get into everything. A lot of good handouts. That is the end of my presentation. And I'd love to open it up for question and answer.
Thank you very much, Tony. I don't want to say made the mistake, but I went to the website one day and like 4 hours later, I came up for air. And then I sent an email going, we need more help on this than what I can give. So thank you very much. So I'll read off a few questions that came in during chat here. Okay. And the first question is, given MIOSHA enforces the occupational health and safety within the employer and employee relationship, how does this extend to an employee and supplier relationship? For example, if you visit a supplier and see a lack in engineering, admin controls, infection prevention measures, or other items, what action does MIOSHA recommend?
So first of all, you know, the interesting thing about the virus is MIOSHA protects employees from occupational hazards. The virus makes other employees, other people, the occupational hazard that you need to protect them from. So in sending an employee out to another employer's work site or location, you're sending them into a contaminant source. You're sending them into a dangerous situation akin to a non-locked out piece of equipment or an unguarded opening. So you're responsible for training your employee. You know, the training that you give underneath the standard trains them to recognize what should be in place underneath our rules. And then your administrative training needs to be, if you see a work site that's out of compliance with these rules, you are not to enter. And it's just pretty, you know, straightforward stuff, just as you would do for any of these other hazards. You know, do not enter, go to a safe location, contact your supervisor, you know, that type of human resource policy work.
Okay. Very good. Then the next question, and this one, I'm super glad you asked this one because I'm like, I don't know what else you would put it in. What is the recommended way then to dispense a bleach solution if not in spray bottles?
Great question. So gel. First of all, if you can gel that so that it's less likely to become a mist, an airborne mist, that's a great step. If you can change the dispersion method, right? So it's not a spray or an open pour. It's a closed container, perhaps that you can dip a cloth into or something like that. You need to. The main concern with bleach, and the reason I brought it up is it is a corrosive and eye corrosive. Once you put it in a spray bottle and you put that in an employee's hands, they have an occupational eye hazard, spray hazard to a corrosive. You go into our medical services first aid standard, you need to have eye wash provisions for that. And they're very stringent. Our MIOSHA's eye wash provisions are very stringent. Mm-hmm. So it's just to avoid that entire brick and mortar change around. Because a lot of people, wouldn't think of that as being something that triggers an entire regulation and that level of change in their facility, but it is. So wipes, gels, pumps, if you got to use it, do an appropriate PPE hazard assessment, give your guys the appropriate eye protection that they need. And, you're going to have to start looking at where eye washes are sited in your facility. And you might need to look at something like a reservoir style eye wash that's mounted on a dolly that's portable, mm-hmm. that the employee can take with them while they're completing their disinfection duties, which is still a lot.
That is. I will stay away from that then.
And you got your HazCom labeling too. I mean, it's a secondary container of a hazardous chemical. So, yes. It just piles up. You're looking at a bunch of citations.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It's like playing MIOSHA bingo when you walk into places now.
Yeah, and it's like it's such a good thing to do. You're giving them their disinfectant to keep them safe. Here you go.
Exactly. Good. Those were our 2 questions that we had. Feel free, if you've got any other questions and you didn't throw them in chat, please feel free to take yourself off mute and ask any additional questions that you have there. I'll give you a second if there's any more that people have.
And I'll put my contact information in the chat too, just so everyone has it.
Perfect. Yes, and I'll send it out with the email too, so it should be there. All right. Doesn't look like we have any other questions.
I got a real quick one. I'm sorry. Ahead. Hi, Tony. Thanks for your time. I wanted to get back to the face masks in the workspace. Most of the tasks that we have identified are classified as medium. I know you kind of went into this, but our situation is we have maybe 4 employees in a wing in our building. They're all greater than 6 feet separated. Are they allowed to remove their face masks at their workstation, or would you recommend them keeping their face masks on?
Probably not. And the reason is the definition of a shared space. We had, I don't know if you guys received these, but we have frequently asked questions that we publish on our website. One of them is the definition of a shared space. And it doesn't look to distance necessarily. So if you had a large conference room and guys were sitting 20 feet apart at the conference room, they would still both have to wear their mask. It looks to physical barriers. So with the appropriate hung plastic barriers, you might be able to allow those employees and the right administrative controls and markings, nobody come within this guy's working area. We put up some basically splash guards for him while he's doing his work. Yeah, you could probably arrange it so you get outside the definition of shared space, and then the 6-foot separation would enable you to let them remove their masks. But mere distance alone will not be enough.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Very good. All right. So I know I'm going to a few vendors and putting some things out when I go out next week. I've got a few meetings out in the world next week that are in person.
And hand out my info. If anyone's got follow-up questions, let them know I'm here.
Be like, call my friend Tony.
Yeah,
It'll be
free and
great.
confidential. It's about as good as it gets.
There you go.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which is why I think it was so important to have you join us here tonight, because there's a lot of information out there.
Yep.
And like I said, I went down that rabbit hole for about 4 hours and I was like, I don't even know where to start. My head's spinning. So this is fantastic. I thank you so much for jumping in and joining us tonight. Like Ed said before, you're all going to get a copy of the presentation and the recording. So if there were things we need to go back to, you need to go back and listen to it again and make sure you heard it correctly. That will all be coming to you within the next 24 hours with my contact information, Tony's contact information. And again, if you've got other comments or questions on the HR Excellence series and what you'd like to see, or if you want to be a larger part of it, you can certainly do so as well. Tony, any final comments tonight?
You know, I wish I had something witty lined up, but just I just want to just keep encouraging everyone to reach out to me. You know, I do this because I enjoy it. Any help I can give, you know, please just let me know how I can help.
Perfect. I
Yep.
appreciate that. I know I'm leaving here. I'm going to go put April 14th on
Yep.
my calendar. So April 14th, look for the new rules that come out. April 15th, pay my taxes. I got it. I'm all ready for those.
Great.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for joining us tonight. I hope you enjoyed our January offering of our HR Excellence series of our first webinar for 2021. And I hope you all have a good night and look for an email from me within the next 24 hours. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.